Hello everybody and welcome back to the Overlap Breakdown channel. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Ume, who's a professional football scout and analyst, and we're here to analyse why Ruben Amorim's tactics are currently not working at Manchester United and whether or not the Reds are truly in a relegation scrap. Right, kicking right off, Manchester United have played their last 12 Premier League games. They've only got 4 points, winning 3 games, drawing 1, with 8 losses, and they've conceded double the amount of goals they've scored in that time. And if you put that form over the course of a 38-game season, it is between 31-32 points, which is relegation form. And the last league season in which they suffered more defeats in their first 25 matches was 73-74, where they were relegated from the top flight. So obviously, there is a wider conversation to be had about the current state of Manchester United and the players and what's going on behind the scenes with the redundancies. And there's a lot of other factoring elements into the situation. But I think we're going to strip it back because at the end of the day, Manchester United should not be 15th in the Premier League and they should not be even in the same sentence as a relegation form. And I think Erik ten Hag, when he was sacked, a lot of people were optimistic that the group of players was good enough under a new manager to kick on and do something where they could at least, there was conversations about us making a late dart into Europe and squeezing in there, and it's not worked so far. And whilst he hasn't got his players, I want you to just kickstart us right off and just talk about the initial first problems that we did cover in the piece on Amorim when he first joined Manchester United. We spoke about the bit of their struggles in possession, out possession, and I want you just to do like a very basic gloss
top line
summary of why currently Amorim's tactics aren't working at face value.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely go into all of it in a little bit more detail, but if we look at Amorim's side, if we look at Manchester United's side in general, one, I always go back to player quality. People who've watched this channel will know that I strip everything back to, are you getting your best players in the best zones, in areas where they can maximise their strengths and minimise their weaknesses? And I think Amorim is struggling because obviously he doesn't have his players, but on top of that, he's not putting his best players in his best zones, and we can break that down a little later on. But just for, illustrative purposes, we'll go with Bruno in the pivot. He's got good energy and good legs in there, but you want him creating, scoring, making chances. You've got, the likes of your wing-backs, often players who are more sort of defensively inclined. Dalot is someone who's been expected to push forward and be a really attacking player, but his best moments this season have probably come inverting and being sort of a central midfield player. You've got some fast, good transitional attackers, but Amorim's obviously playing in the slower style. So players probably not being profiled to the best of their ability. Secondarily, obviously, is the slower style. Like I just touched upon there, Manchester United are a club who historically have been an exciting team, who have played directly. Ten Hag was criticised for trying to tap into that, and it did make games a bit chaotic and end-to-end. But on the other hand, it did cause Manchester United to score goals, and United are lacking that firepower up top, that sort of quick transitional ability. Ahmad obviously out, will touch upon some injuries there being a cause for some of the problems. And then on top of that, I think in the initial video I spoke about some general concerns that I had with his philosophy. One, United being too passive.
Lack of pressure.
Yeah, a lack of pressure. So one, they do seem to try and apply pressure, but it's not good enough in the first instance in its shape. Secondarily, with 5 at the back, you've often got too many players in that back line, and you're leaving your midfield and your attack a bit underloaded, and teams can get out. You're not applying the appropriate pressure there. In not applying a pressure, you're letting other teams to build into the game, and it doesn't look good for the fans. The players don't love playing and sitting off of teams when they're expected to be be top level players. And I think not being able to be dominant when you do have the ball, and by sitting in deep, not being able to attack quickly. You're kind of not getting the benefits of either system there. You're probably getting the weaknesses of both. So generally, those are the weaknesses, but we can certainly dive into them a little bit more.
Yeah, so just going to tap into a lot of what Ume has just spoken about, and the main points that he's made is that Manchester United are a lot slower under Ruben Amorim, which statistically is right. Their direct speed under Ten Hag was 1.87 metres per second, and that has plummeted to 1.55. And I know it sounds like it's only 0.3 difference, but that difference is the difference of taking you from one of the most direct teams in the league to one of the least direct teams in the league in terms of the pace of play. And in that time, obviously, Manchester United have scored less, conceded more shots. They are having less high turnovers. They're having more open play sequences consisting of 10 plus passes. Their sequences time is lasting longer. Their passes per defensive action, which basically measures the amount of times you turn over the ball per game, is down, showing again they're a bit more passive. And I'm just going to take it to the tactics board now. So we've just spoken about Manchester United are scoring less, they're conceding more, they're having less shots, and they're conceding more shots.
Yeah.
So that at face value is like the worst.
You've become bad.
Yeah, you've become worse than what it was before. And I'm going to speak about why that is. So straight away from the build-up, me and Umir talk about, or we've spoken about at Sporting, Amorim likes to do this thing where he has the top centre-half at the top of the box. So the middle centre-half pushes to the top of the box when Onana's trying to build out. And the pressure that comes onto Manchester United means that this player can often be the spare man. But what we have in these situations is Harry Maguire or sometimes Matthias de Ligt standing on this position, and they are not really the centre-back profile that you would, love to be dancing out of pressure. And what happens here is Manchester United have got next to no width, and even though Garnacho sometimes pulls out like that, the midfield is very vacated. You've got 5 bodies in the back line, and when we speak about 3 at the back teams being really good in possession, it's usually a lopsided back 3. So there's certain instances where teams like Inter Milan push their wing back on here, shuffle the back, and you've got a back 4, and it's very City-like 4-2-4 in build-up. I'm pretty sure that's what you do from the goalkeeper kicks, but that is not what we're seeing from Ruben Amorim, and he's wanting to keep a lot of bodies in the first phase of build-up, and it's really annoying because we've not been a slow build-up team. Andre Onana is going along with pretty much every single goalkeeper kick. And yeah, it's just not really working. And the out ball to Rasmus Højlund, he's not really a great target man. And he's not doing enough spinning in behind. So straight away, structurally on the ball, it's suboptimal because we've got Harry Maguire or de Ligt in the centre of the block, in the centre of the press, and he's not going to dance out of that pressure. The wide centre-halves aren't good enough on the ball, especially when Lisandro Martinez isn't playing, to play these really aggressive line breakers. And when we spoke about his Sporting team right out of the gates, we were putting a lot of emphasis on Inacio, Diamande, who are very, very penetrative passers in behind.
Also great carries of the ball
as
well.
and do these drives. And outside of Lisandro Martinez, there's not really been a Manchester United player in the wide spaces who has demonstrated that.
I think Mazraoui at times probably has.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads us on to talk about the number one problem for me, which has been the wing-back profiling. Yeah. And this is just the one thing that I think needs to go. Yeah. So in an Amorim team, as we get gradually up the pitch, these 2 players will hug inside the pockets, and then the wing-backs create the majority, or all of your width actually, and then it becomes this 3-box-3 with the centre forward leading the line. You've got your 2 10s here, which is usually Garnacho, Ahmad, Bruno Fernandes, and you've got your 2 base players here. And just visually, you can see that all the creativeness, especially when you get in around blocks, like look at the team that are defending in a 4-4-2. If that block is compact and narrow, the only spaces that are going to be available are down the sides. And under Ruben Amorim so far, we've played Mazraoui, Dalot, Ahmad, and the only one of them who is good enough to contribute attacking is Amad Diallo, who's now out for the rest of the season.
Garnacho, I'd say he's had a few moments.
Yeah, a few moments.
Dorgu as well has come in, and I think he's been bright.
And the Dorgu signing is really positive. We covered him on the channel. We often said how he's a lot more of an attacking wing-back. But when Manchester United get into this shape, I want you to now touch on the staticness. There's virtually no rotations, no fluidity. And that means that you have to dominate 1v1 out wide. Or if you look at a Pep team, for example, in an attacking shape, there are rotations, but the wingers really only stay wide. The centre-forward only stays there. These pocket players can drop and stuff, but they have to be good individually. And I want you to touch on why this shape is leaving United to have quite a bit of the ball in certain games, but not threatening, really.
I think one is the instruction from Amorim is for this team to be quite slow in its build-up. And when you do progress the ball, you end up in a situation where you're playing and your team's not confident in the spacings of the players to begin with. So they're keeping the ball slightly for keeping the ball's sake. There's not necessarily players in the team that are going to take that big risk because obviously I think part of that comes into the fact that they've not had the ball for large periods of the game. So if you're a team that wins the ball back quickly and you stay on the ball, you're willing to play riskier passes because you know you'll get the ball back soon.
Yeah.
That's a Manchester City sort of philosophy. Whereas if United, let's say you're a United player, you've not had the ball for 5-10 minutes, now you're in settled position, you might not play that risky pass because if you lose the ball, you'll know you have to defend for another 5 or 6 minutes. So I think that's one. On top of that, I think profile-wise, you've not necessarily got the players in these small spaces that can kind of connect and link with other players. Now, Ahmad, I think he's a brilliant example of somebody who can do that, and Ahmad's a player who's often played inside right.
Yeah.
Playing inside right, he tends to pass the ball back to the centre of the pitch if he is facing away. When he does receive the ball facing forward, he tries to make something happen himself.
Yeah.
If you've got a player on this side, for example, in the pockets here, if this was a right footer, Xerxes, someone who comes to mind, they're able to find players out wide a little bit more easily, but that's not something angle-wise that we've seen too much from. Bruno Fernandes is somebody who you want in these spaces, trying to create things, trying to play a little bit more risky, and he's often deployed a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Then you get the issue of the wing-backs. Sometimes I think the wing-backs just don't get up in time.
No. So reserved, and it feels like the bodies in the final third is just not enough. Like, it feels like we play a back five in the final third. And we spoke about potentially like the wide centre half like stepping forward, and we've seen it a little bit in the Liverpool game.
With Lisandro,
scoring.
Yeah.
But it just seems like there's so much like there's so many nerves in the final third.
My biggest concern with this Manchester United side is, look, I don't have a big problem with back five teams, but my issue with the back five team is how do you use that extra man in defence?
Yeah.
So we can move on to sort of how they press and things, but when Manchester United do press, they often leave those three centre backs in that back line. Whereas in my head, and I'll give Amorim the complete benefit of the doubt here, I think Amorim wants his wide centre backs to step in
all the time.
Yeah, both of them to step in.
I think so.
And look, if your right centre-back steps in, at least you've got two back there. If your left centre-back steps in, you've still got two there.
Yeah.
And then when you do have to defend deep, you've got that back five cover. So I think that's Amorim's idea.
We criticised Ten Hag for doing the same thing, United fans.
Yeah.
Like, the back line was just so passive.
Yeah.
So does that, because clearly it's got to be personnel then?
Well, I think so, but I think
you would think, wouldn't you?
Yeah. It's hard, like instruction-wise and spacing-wise, for players who've not played in a back five system to know, look, I'm a centre-back, I'm going to step into midfield and be confident in that situation. I do think it's personnel-based, as a Manchester City fan, Husanov, the signing that we've got, super aggressive, super front-footed. He runs all the way into here, the person, man.
Yeah.
And we're not going to see the same from the likes of, I don't know, like a Mazraoui and De Ligt at the moment.
Do you think that, like, we're speaking about this personnel, obviously we're doing this the day after Manchester United have played Tottenham Hotspur, and the whole game plan was designed on Mazraoui stepping out to cover James Maddison, the spare man, and to shut the space. So Bruno was man-marking Jed Spence, who had this free role, and then Mazraoui was the one responsible for stepping in and closing down Maddison, leaving the space. But oftentimes we're just seeing Maddison here, Mazraoui a bit more like reserved and not stepping out. Like, how can that be the case?
Yeah.
Is it like, for me, because it was something I criticised the Ten Hag structure about a lot.
Yeah.
Because at times it went on for that long that I was like, it's got to be instructed that they're not stepping in.
Yeah.
But it just does feel like there's a lot of moments now at United where the back line is so reserved, and we're not focused on pinning teams back. And we'll move on to the press in a minute. But do you know what I mean? Like,
I completely understand your point. One thing I'll mention is, especially in the first couple of games, I said Mazraoui is probably one of the only wide centre backs that actually does step in here. And in the game yesterday, he did try and do that. I think he's probably worried that by stepping in, there's space in behind him. With Ten Hag, look, I think partly it's down to player profile and personnel, but their entire back line kind of did sit off under Ten Hag. Whereas, at least under Amorim, it looks like the players are trying to, but the timing
is wrong.
And when they do press, and the intensity at which they press is wrong. I actually put a tweet out yesterday that spoke a little bit about, given what Amorim wants his wide centre-backs to do, is they're almost like midfielders. It might be better for a defensive midfielder to play one of the wide centre-back roles, given how often they need to press into these areas, and they might be a little bit more comfortable doing so. I don't know, it's just a suggestion, but that's the sort of idea of a wide centre-back that needs to be deployed in these areas, I think. Right,
Umir has segued us on nicely to talk about Manchester United out of possession now. So This is a situation that we often see with Manchester United. Let's just imagine that the blue team are in their build-up shape, and we often speak about every team playing the same way.
Yeah.
So we've set up a 3-2-5 against Manchester United's 5-2-3, and we're going to speak about how this is something that me and you really did criticise, not only at Sporting, but in the pieces after, where we spoke about this mainly, these three players. And I want to just give you an example of what it is. So Manchester United want to keep pressure on the ball, but they aren't pressing intensely enough to basically be stood on the goalkeeper kick and back them up. So when a team is in possession, Amorim is leaving these three players forward so he can go man for man with these players like this. The problem is now, is behind this pressure, you've got a 2v2. And as we've just spoken about before with Mazraoui, if one of these players is dropping in to create a 3v2 around this central space, this centre-half has got to go. And that is Amorim's philosophy.
And logically it makes sense because you're man for man across the pitch.
Yeah, and that is what it's supposed to look like. So as you can see now, if you just look at the board, every single player has got a man to cover. And that is how all the elite teams play, man for man across the pitch. The problem is this doesn't happen, and this is far too passive. So often what you get is Manchester United sitting in a 5-2-3 high off the ball, and with so much space in between these lines here, it just leaves the opportunity for these players to swivel. And if these players are keeping it high, look at how much space you can already see just on the board, for example, how much space.
These guys drag really wide for teams as well. So you're getting your United front three.
Really
and look,
narrow.
Often teams want to block that central space, but then it gives you that conundrum. Do these guys follow here? And I think it's sensible to follow here and kind of make your shift your block a little bit like that. But in doing so and in playing quite wide around this initial pressure, you do bring your players out and they're slow to come out, and then these players drop in, and that's kind of that sort of main problem that United are facing. But teams are kind of privy to the idea that they can kind of go around United in that fashion.
It's annoying because Manchester United are defending in a 5-back, but it's so narrow. Because of how narrow the forward line, how narrow the pivot is, and it just means that when teams have literally every single team in the Premier League now is committing 5 to the last line. And we're seeing this trend in the Premier League where the wide centre halves are now going man for man with the 8s, and the wing backs are covering the opposition team's wingers. But this here is such a common pattern from every single Premier League team that this player drops in here. It can be down there, down the side, it can go into midfield. The problem is the responsibility that the wide centre-half has to track that man throughout the entire game.
And they don't feel comfortable coming into these areas.
And I think one of the best examples we've seen was Martinez did it quite well in the Liverpool and the City games.
He's done it well on De Bruyne.
Really stepping out aggressive. The problem is like when Lisandro Martinez is out of that back line, and even though physically he's not amazing, the tenacity he has in his game is really helpful for these situations. Mazraoui's good, but again, we're not speaking about De Ligt, Maguire, even Euro at times this season, stepping into there, getting really touch tight.
Well,
going
he tried against Southampton.
So
that spacing,
so I think this is a really big problem, and obviously this isn't even to talk about how isolated this is in midfield. And one thing we've seen Amorim do quite a lot, and one thing we need to praise him for, is if you're going to try and sit quite low, which is what Manchester United have done, why not just defending the 5-4-1 and drop these? And that's what he's done recently. But then you need to understand this jump here is incredibly hard to make. And when a team's got 3 build-up players, this centre forward is virtually non-existent in the press. And if this ball goes here, the distance this player has to jump, because also he's got to cover this man here like that, but then the distance he has to jump over there is going to be long, tiring and late, more importantly.
And I think in Amorim's best games as a United coach and in United's best performances, they've been against top sides where like United and United fans are probably happy for the opposition to have the ball here. I think trying to make that jump is probably unrealistic.
It's not.
But when you sit in this sort of 5-4-1, you block space really well, you make it hard for oppositions to score. The issue here becomes now you're playing like a bottom half team who
and he said at
the ball.
Sporting when he played against City, we cannot defend like that at Manchester United. That was one of the things that was said to him. He said after the game, we have to defend on the front foot, not like a Sporting against City.
So look, as you mentioned, that is something that we brought up as well initially, and I think, look, for coaches scaling up to the top teams, that's one of the hardest problems that they face. I think, look, can you not kind of move these players here and look,
Yeah, just go to
here.
a 4.
Just go to a 4 in your pressing shape. Let's say this is a little bit higher up. Just go to a 4 in your pressing shape. This player is not necessarily going to commit to the last line, and even if he does, look, at that point, switch back. But I think, like, for sides, or even if you go for sort of to a 4-2-3-1, but I think that extra body in midfield...
He's needed.
Looks
consistently
better.
In there, though.
Yeah.
But, like, not stepping in and arriving...
I don't mind the idea of stepping in if it happens, but one, it doesn't happen, and two, they're having to cover large distances. Now, you can go a bit more zonal. You can't. I don't think you can go man for man across the pitch all the time.
Not in a 5-2-3 like this.
No, there needs to be a sort of a hybrid element to it, I think, in my opinion. And yeah, that's why I almost suggested a midfielder in these areas is a little bit more comfortable, or just playing an extra man in there.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've noticed, like, and this will be like one of the final things we do to wrap up, is like people go, no one's playing a three at the back and no one does it well. Yeah. And the main like example is Inzaghi's Inter Milan. Yeah. They are like the best. They are Xabi Alonso's. They are the best 3-back teams in Europe. Full stop.
One of the best teams in the world.
None of them, neither of them defend in a 5, like press in a 5.
Yeah.
Inzaghi's Inter push on the wing back as a winger.
Yep.
So it's a 4-4-2. So it literally goes like this. And that is how Inter defend.
Yeah.
That is how Inter defend settled block. And it's really, really frustrating that, like, so he'll be like there and that'll tuck in. Yeah. So like the wing back lops up and then it pushes over. Yeah. And Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen defend with Frimpong, who's a wing back, as a right midfielder.
And I think that's a new change because he realised initially it didn't work playing in this sort of fashion.
And it's just them tweaks. And I know them managers have been there for a few seasons. But I think they're the tweaks that Amorim has to make because, like we're saying here, having 2 bodies in central spaces consistently throughout the game, and don't mind the stepping up as we're talking about, but let's pretend like this player is in front of Manchester United centre-half. So if that player drops, he is always going to have space. He might not have the angles to pick a pass in behind, but he's always going to receive the ball with virtually no one near him. And I just think these little changes that he'll get a feel for the squad and stuff like that, but I think they're the changes he's going to have to make. And
I mean, we're not saying change from your 5-back system at all. We're saying in certain situations, especially in the press, if you want to apply a bit more pressure, it's better, I think, to do it in a 4-4-2 or a 4-3-3 shape. And then once teams pen you in, then go back to a 5-back. But you need that hybrid player who can play sort of midfield and defence, whether that's your wing-back, like Frimpong under Alonso, or whether that's sort of a centre-back, centre midfielder, like Rodri's done on a very few occasions for Manchester City. I think they're the questions that need to be asked. And then, obviously, you still got the attacking issues that we touched on earlier. But if you're not giving up chances, if you're establishing your dominance,
you can at least play on a
then
counter.
you're reducing the amount of chances you're facing, and then you're giving yourself the best chance to win.
Just to wrap up, what do you think of Amorim? Do you think he'll be all right?
I think, look, when you get on a really bad run of form like this,
it's hard, isn't it?
It's really hard because one, I think we were speaking off air about this actually. You need the charisma and you need the fans on your side to buy you a few games. And I think you also need the individual brilliance to win you
win your games. I
think Ten Hag, for his flaws and for some of his naivety in certain moments, he was really brilliant at coming up with this random novel tweak at really bad points of his tenure that sort of sustained his career. McTominay would always pop up with a few goals. Marcus Rashford had good periods as well. He'd come up with a random tweak. He brought Eriksen back in the side. Yeah. So in those senses, he was a very good firefighter coach, for example. Amorim, he's very strict to his principles. And in a way, I respect it, but I think there needs to be some malleability, which is, it's funny because that's the reason why people are saying, look, we need to get rid of Ten Hag.
I know, he's moved from his principles.
Yeah.
Do you think, I think he should stick with them. I think principles. I think principles are different to shape.
Keep your game model, but make tweaks that minimise the weaknesses. My biggest issue is how the players are being profiled. I would love to see Collier. I know he's out injured, but I'd love to see Collier in that midfield. I know he's not the most experienced, but get Bruno Fernandes a little bit higher up. Ahmad out, one of the best players that they've got, probably your player of the season.
Probably the player of the season.
But how are you going to get goals? Where are you going to get your goals from? It's really hard. If you become astute defensively, I think that works. But you need to be very strong defensively or get goals. And at the moment, it's neither here or there.
Well, as we spoke about at the top of the episode, we've conceded double the amount of goals than we've scored in the past 12. So I don't think that'll be changed anytime soon.
No.
Anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy, please like, comment and follow the channel, and we'll be back next week for more Premier League reviews.